So what do you picture? What thoughts enter your head when you hear the word wilderness? Maybe like this picture, you're thinking of a foreboding wasteland of impassable stickers and brambles, where there's a sense of dread hovering over the landscape like a dark enveloping shroud, an alien and a lonesome place where wild beasts lurk in the shadows ready to pounce upon the unsuspecting traveler. The wilderness is where we come face to face with our deepest fears. And it's all around us. It's more than just the deserts and the badlands of the world. Heck, nowadays, tourists like me, we vacation carefree in places that once struck terror into the hearts of the pioneers. These days, no dense thicket or dank marsh or boundless desert can hold a candle to the wilderness that's enveloping those of us living in the early years of this third millennium. For this wilderness contains all the fear and anguish that we can handle. We know just how dangerous this wilderness can be. We've all had harrowing experiences when we've somehow wandered in too far. We've been frightened, maybe even attacked or injured. We've lost friends, family members, and acquaintances who vanished in the wilderness, clutching nothing but some worthless ideology they employed in vain to save themselves, like carrying an empty canteen into the desert. The wilderness is all around us, always moving, fanning out in some places, being forced back in others. And most of us do everything we can to avoid it at all costs. We surround ourselves with comforts. We secure our perimeter. We fence in our property. We gate our communities. We post keep off signs and double lock our doors. Some of us surround ourselves with lots of friends and relatives, while others avoid contact with people altogether. But no matter what the defense, the one thing we know is this: no one in their right mind would ever willingly enter the wilderness. Life is challenging enough. Why would we intentionally test ourselves further? Isn't it enough these days to merely survive? But if that's the case, then why did Jesus enter the wilderness immediately following his baptism? 40 days he was in there. 40 days tempted by Satan in the midst of his stronghold. 40 days struggling to survive among the wild beasts that lay in wait behind every erratic boulder and crooked tree. You know, the Gospel of Mark contains no stories of Jesus' conception or birth or childhood or early adulthood. This morning's scripture passage is the first time Jesus comes on the scene, already 3 decades into his life. We know he is someone very special because we're told that at his baptism, the heavens were parted and the Spirit of God descended upon him like a dove. A voice was heard proclaiming, "You are my Son, the beloved, and with you I am well pleased." So at this point, 2 things are made known to Jesus: that he is God's beloved child, and that his life up to this point had pleased God. From this time on, Jesus is keenly aware of his anointed calling. That's what Christ means, anointed one. That's what Messiah means. So what happens next? Well, come on, put on the white robe, make him a high priest, let him proclaim God's will from the pomp and the majesty of the temple in Jerusalem, yes? Or heck, give him a TV network, right? Let him make a little cash telling people what they want to hear. Yes. Well, if that's what we were expecting, then the plot twist in the very next verse must strike us like a bolt from the blue. And the Spirit immediately drove him into the wilderness. What is going on here? What purpose could this possibly serve? What lesson is to be learned in such a nasty place as that? What more could Jesus understand about himself in the wilderness than what was already revealed to him through God's words from above? He already knows who he is. He is a special child of God. He's loved and affirmed by his heavenly Father. What more does he need to know? Why is the chosen Son of God now driven by the Spirit, by God's Spirit, into the wilderness? We might ask ourselves the same question whenever it becomes evident that we too are being driven into places and situations where we don't want to go. Why does God want me to go there? For what possible purpose? Hey, I already know who I am, right? I'm a child of God. I get it, right? I done got my blessed assurance, so why in the world would the God who calls me beloved want to send me into the wilderness with all of its trials and temptations, its shock and awe, its sorrow, its death? Why can't my life be free of challenges, such potential heartache and pain? We just want to say, come on, God. Just let me put on the white robe, hand me my harp, and let me sing, when we all get to heaven. Right? But here's the deal, gang. God has a rationale for everything, and there's a big reason why, like Jesus, we are told not to avoid, but rather to seek out the wilderness. You see, like Jesus, we have two natures. Jesus was fully God, but he was also fully human. It was in the wilderness where he would clash for 40 days with what it means to be fully human, a creature of dust and ash, limited by time, subjected to the physical forces of entropy, decay, and death. And yes, saints, we too are spiritual beings, beloved children of God. But as Ash Wednesday reminds us, we are also biological creatures of dust, standing with one foot in heaven, the other firmly on earth. And while it is with gladsome hearts that we receive the good news of resurrection life, it is often with great apprehension that we come to terms with our mortality. Lent is the designated time in the church year when we too are encouraged to come to terms with these two natures, what it means to be both a child of God as well as a creature of dust. Every year we need to hear the story reminding us of who we really are. Lent occurs in this transitional time of the year, just as winter is ending and spring begins. And so too, this 40-day period of spiritual transition and growth. So what does it all mean? Well, for one thing, it means that Lent is about a lot more than giving up chocolate for a month. All right? If that's all Lent means to us, we'd be better off doing nothing. Go ahead and eat the chocolate, because such meager sacrifice only belittles Jesus' ordeal in the wilderness, not to mention his life that followed. Hey, Jesus, thanks for braving the wilderness for 40 days. I'm going to stop watching Housewives for the following month. Hey, Jesus, thanks for standing up for the poor and dispossessed throughout your ministry. I'll try not taking your name in vain for Lent. Hey, Jesus, thanks for taking the fight to Jerusalem, for overthrowing the tables of the money changer, for standing up to Pilate. Thanks for dying a slow, torturous death on the cross. I'm going to swear off ice cream for the month. You see how easy it is to cheapen and depreciate this time of year? We piddle around with trifles. What we ought to be doing is steeling ourselves for serious ministry. No, if we believe this is a time for serious self-reflection and self-discovery, then we ought to do more than just to give up a few sweets. We need to willfully enter the wilderness, and through devotion and self-examination, look our souls in the mirror and ask ourselves who we really are. Really. Rather than avoid, we need to come face to face with all the temptations, trials, and heartaches that plague our lives, and realize just how vulnerable we are, how tenuous our hold on life becomes apart from our faith. Now pay attention, please. It is of utmost importance that we follow Jesus' order of events throughout this time. Jesus was only driven into the wilderness after his divine nature was revealed to him. And that divine nature was what he fell back on once things got tough in there. He knew who he was when he went in. And that's so important. Saints, no one outside the faith should enter the wilderness, because you may not make it out alive. Only one who, like Jesus, is aware of God's constant presence will accept the pain and suffering that occurs when one faces the perils of the wilderness. Only one who has faith in the resurrection can hope to look death in the face and not break down. Only one assured of God's constant love would dare stare into the icy void of our mortal natures without collapsing in despair. But stare we must. We are called on to do that. Because a faith that remains untested is an unreliable faith. We can say we have faith. We can say, Lord, Lord. But when we're faced with challenges, when we're faced with tests, if that faith isn't real, we will fail. Only a person who's come to terms with his or her greatest fears can know what it means to march forth with courage. Only a person who's met the devil on his own terms in the wilderness, where he is at his most powerful, will be ready for each and every roadblock that may be thrown into his or her path to Calvary. That's because only a person who's come to terms with his or her own mortality has the courage to stare down death itself. They will know what it's like to truly live. And only the one who's lived through the darkness and the despair of the cross can ever experience the gift of the empty tomb on Easter morning. The wilderness, wherever and whenever we enter it, is the opportunity to do just that. It is in the wilderness that we are tempered like steel to go forth and bring the kingdom of God to fulfillment. So use this time. Use this time to prepare your hearts for the passion that waits us during Holy Week. The wilderness isn't that far. It can be just as close as your nightstand. Spend time in personal devotion. Read Scripture daily. Come, like so many have, to Bible study. Go out there. Work a day or two in a soup kitchen. Go to those places. Enter a place you normally would avoid and see what opportunities await you there for serious ministry. Do these things. And think of other things that you could be challenged at. And after these 40 days then, I promise that you, like Jesus, will emerge stronger and better equipped for the journey ahead. The journey that leads to the cross. Let's pray.